obstacle to the gospel is when a culture embraces false ideas, then they can't hear the gospel message. It shoots past. You ever had a conversation like that? When you get in the middle of the conversation, you realize we're not even on the same page. When you say God and I say God, we're not talking about the same guy. And this is what's happening in the issue of humanity. This is what women think their value is. This is what men think their value is. And you know what? It's not just immaturity. The epidemic of young men being apathetic and not caring is not just bad behavior. We accept adolescent malehood as if it's normal. It's not normal in any culture outside of Western America. Well, in broader West. It's just not. I'm not saying there's no goofy behavior or anything like that, but this idea that it's okay for guys not to care. Now see, biblically, it's not immaturity. God put us on the planet to care. There's no other explanation you can get for humanity from Genesis 1 through 3. Genesis 2 says, at this point, nothing has brought it up because God had not put men on the planet to care for it. That is our design for it. If we do not do it, then we're living against our design. And the gospel shoots past. In fact, G.K. Chesterton, who I love because he always looks grumpy in all of his pictures, said this: the huge modern heresy is to alter the human soul to fit modern social conditions instead of altering modern social conditions to fit the human soul. And I could give you example after example after this. One, for example, and I'm not going to deal with this very much, is what New Jersey did in their Senate bill. It's just an example. It had to do with human embryonic stem cell research. I'm not going to go into it. But here's what you see, for example, in biotechnology and science and technology and that sort of thing, is that you redefine a human being. Does that make sense? In other words, what happened in this bill is that, well, I'll just give you an example real quick. I'm probably going to run out of time using this, but that's right. New Jersey in 2004 passed a bill that said the derivation and use of human embryonic stem cells, human embryonic germ cells, and human adult stem cells from any source, including somatic cell nuclear transplantation, shall be permitted in the state. And all God's people said, huh? Right. What this basically was is after President Bush vetoed the stem cell thing, what went around is President Bush has outlawed stem cell research, which didn't happen. He didn't even outlaw embryonic stem cell research. I wish he would have. As you know, embryonic stem cell research is research that results in the destruction of a human embryo, at least by the only technology we have available to us. So a lot of states got on and said, we're going to allow embryonic stem cells in our state. All Bush did was say there's no federal funds going there. There's still state funds that can go there. There's still private funding that can go there. And so a lot of states got on this. For example, California did this with Prop 93, and they devoted $3 billion 7 years ago, and they haven't seen any return on it. Which is another issue. But New Jersey did this, and they said, we're going to allow stem cell research, and we're going to allow people to get these stem cells from any source, including somatic cell nuclear transplantation. Now, that's big words, but what does that mean? It's scientific speak for human cloning. In other words, you can get embryos by cloning embryos. So this basically legalized human cloning. Does that make sense? This is the same bill of the same bill, the second paragraph of the same bill. A person who knowingly engages or assists in the cloning of a human being is guilty of a crime in the first degree. Now let's review. In this paragraph, human cloning is legal. In this paragraph, the cloning of a human being is not only a crime, it's a crime in the first degree. How can you legalize and criminalize human cloning in the same bill? How do you do this? Here's how you do it. You redefine what a human being is. That's all you got to do. As used in this section, the cloning of a human being means the replication of a human individual by cultivating a cell with genetic material through the egg, embryo, fetal, and newborn stages into a new human individual. In other words, it's not a human being until it passes through the egg, embryo, fetal, and newborn stages. What does that mean? It's not a human person until it is born. So in New Jersey, by this bill, it is legal to clone an embryo. It's legal to clone an embryo and plant it into a woman and allow it to develop and grow. But the moment it's born, you're guilty of a capital offense. Now, what is capital crimes usually reserved for? Those who destroy life. If we ever figure out this human cloning thing, which with recent developments in stem cell research, it should be unnecessary. But if we ever did, and a baby was born, by New Jersey standard, that's a capital crime to let someone live. So it's allowing allowing cloning and mandating abortion. The cultural issues here are big. This is what's ironic. Is that what came out of the Enlightenment was this replacement of God with human. Take God out of the picture, let humans make their own decision, the elevation of humans. And it's ironic how the elevation of humanity led the 20th century to be the century of dehumanization, isn't it? Our kids inherited that heritage. Where do they get a good idea of what it means to be a human? I think it's tragic that students get through our homeschools and churches without specific training on what it means to, A, be a human being, B, what it means to be male or female. What's the consequences? We think gay marriage should not be legal. So we stand up and fight it, and all that needs to happen is they need to point the finger back and say, are you saying heterosexual marriage is going well? Are you saying you've got it figured out? You see what I mean? We lose our voice. And then fourth, and I think they're all connected, but I want to take this to another level, and that is students don't get it. Now, here's what I mean by that. What time is it, by the way? Let me pace myself. 10 up. Okay, good. Students don't get Christianity. Here's what I mean by this. When I had my students at Bryan, and some of you are familiar with Bryan know that it's kind of this strange animal, because we at Bryan used to have, and they still have actually, almost an equal division of homeschool, Christian school, and public school students. I mean, you'd think it'd be World War III up there all the time, right? But it actually was pretty fun. But I would have about half of them in my freshman course, and I'd have them write this autobiographical paper about their worldview and that sort of thing. And this line, this fourth point, is just a flat-out quote from their papers. Not all of them, certainly, but many of them. Things like, I've been in church all my life, I just don't get why it's important. Or, I prayed the prayer when I was 4, but I'm not sure that I did it right. Or, I rededicated my life 3-4 times during my teenage years, but I don't think it ever stuck. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I remember, it was I think it was the second year I taught that course. And I'd been so troubled the first year reading this. The second year I looked at these and I just started reading. I grew up in a Christian home. I don't get it. I haven't gotten it. Or I haven't gotten it until coming to Bryan or something like that. I mean, that was the sort of language I used. And I made a commitment at that point. And I said, you know what? If students leave my class and they reject Christianity, that's one thing. But good heavens, if they leave my class and they never got it, that's another thing. In fact, let me tell you what I mean by not getting it. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be said here. I think one thing is they don't know why they believe what they believe. One of the things I like to do, and it's because of my sin nature, actually, but one of the things I like to do when I'm speaking to students, especially if I've never spoke to them before or anything like that, is I'll come in unintroduced and I'll pretend like I'm an atheist on an airplane or a Buddhist. And the reason I do that is not to get them riled up. But, I mean, it is to get them riled up. But it's also to realize, hey, this happens. Has this happened to you? I was flying back from Colorado Springs this year. I was coming back here to Tennessee back in the summer before we moved, and I sat down next to this lady on an airplane, and she said, what do you do? I said, I work for a Christian leadership organization called The Summit. And she went, I'm an atheist. Prove me wrong. We hadn't even left the ground yet. I mean, this was the beginning of a 3-hour conversation. I had another lady on an airplane from New Zealand. We hadn't even got off the runway at this point, and she told me I was God. Yeah, it's fun. And so I figured the first time they get challenged like this shouldn't be, either on a plane where they haven't had any practice, or especially in a college classroom where it's 300 to 1 and they're the only Christian, or they're the only Christian willing to stand up or something like that. And so I do this with them. And I just got to be honest with you. Most of the answers that students give me for why they believe what they believe is just plain silly. They don't have a prayer. Now, it doesn't mean then that they'll necessarily lose their faith because they're not good at apologetics. I'm not saying that. Here's what I'm saying. If they don't know why they believe what they believe, one of two things happen. Number one, they either walk away from their faith, or number two, they become schizophrenic in their faith. Christianity is about faith, Life is about reason.